Despite having driven her Jeep into a boulder in the hayfield that was their front yard, despite having to stumble without shoes or slippers 2.5 miles down the twist of pitch-black lanes to the bridge that crossed the brook to Town Street, despite having lain on the asphalt insufficiently clad anywhere from 15 minutes to half an hour before being spotted by the cop cruising by, she was clutching in one of her freezing hands a yellow Post-it note bearing in a drunken scrawl legible by then not even to herself the address of the girl who'd asked at the close of the tape, "When is your wife coming back?" Rosanna's intention was to tell this little whore in person just how fucking back she was. But having stumbled to the ground so many times without getting anywhere near Athena, Rosanna decided on town that she'd be better off dead. That way the girl would never have to ask that question again. None of them would. "I want to suck you right here." Sabbath had not only driven some 6 hours that day, getting Rosanna to the private psychiatric hospital in Usher and then himself back in time to meet Kathy, but had been up confronting this newest upheaval since just after 3 in the morning, when he had been awakened by a loud knock at the side door and the astonishing news that it was the police returning the wife whom he had assumed was sleeping all the while in their king-size bed, not cuddled close to him, needless to say, but safely over at the far edge where, admittedly, he had not journeyed for many a year. When they moved up from queen-size, he had remarked to a visitor that the new bed was so big he couldn't find Rosanna in it. Overhearing him from where she happened to be gardening just outside the kitchen window, she had shouted into the house, "Why don't you look?" But this was easily over a decade back, when he still spoke to people and she was drinking only a bottle a day, and there was still a remnant of hope. Yes, there at the door, earnestly polite now, stood Matthew Balich, whom his former art teacher had failed to recognize either because of the state trooper uniform or because of the booze. She had apparently whispered to Matthew before he authoritatively made known his mission that they must be very quiet to avoid wakening her hard-working husband. She had even tried to tip him. Heading for Kathy's in only a nightgown, she'd still had the recipients to take her purse in case she needed to buy a drink. It had been a long night, morning, and afternoon for Sabbath. First, the Jeep had to be towed off the boulder where she'd run aground. Then arrangements had to be made through the family doctor to get her a bed at Usher. Then the effort had to be undertaken to force her, hung over and hysterical though she was, to agree to 28 days in Usher's rehab program. And then at last there was the 6-hour round trip to the hospital. Rosanna ranting at him from the back seat the whole way there, pausing only to instruct him angrily to pull over at each service station they passed so she could try to relieve herself of her cramps. Why she had to get plastered by stages in those putrid restrooms instead of openly guzzling from the bottle in her purse, Sabbath did not bother to inquire. Her pride? After last night, her pride? Nor did Sabbath do anything to stop her when he listed the ways in which a wife whose intentions had merely been to assist him in his work and to comfort him when there were setbacks and to look after him when the arthritis was most acute had herself been ruthlessly ignored, insulted, exploited, and betrayed. Up front in the car, Sabbath played the Goodman tapes to which he and Drenka used to dance together in the hotel rooms he rented up and down the valley when they'd first become enraptured lovers. During the 130-mile drive west to Usher, the tapes more or less drowned out Rosanna's tirade and allowed Sabbath some respite from all that he'd been through since Matthew had kindly returned her. First they fucked, then they danced. Sabbath and Matthew's mom. And while Sabbath faultlessly sang the lyrics into her grinning, incredulous face, his cum would leak out of her, making even more lubricious the inner roundness of her thighs. The cum would stream all the way down to her heels, and after they danced, he would massage her feet with it. Nestled down at the end of the motel bed, he would suck on her big toe, pretending it was her cock, and she pretended that his cum was her own. And where did all those 78s disappear to? After I went to see what happened to the 1935 Victor recording of Sometimes I'm Happy that was Morty's treasure of treasures, the one with the Bunny Barrigan solo that Morty called the greatest trumpet solo ever by anyone. Who got Morty's records? What happened to his things after Mother died? Where are they? stroking with one spoon-shaped thumb the breadth of Croatian cheekbone while with the other jiggling her on-off switch. Sabbath sang Stardust to Drenka, not like Hoagie Carmichael in English, but in French, no less. Suivant le silence de la nuit, répète ton nom. Exactly the way it was sung for the prom crowds by Gene Hochberg, who led the swing band in which Morty played clarinet, and who, amazingly, would wind up just like Morty flying B-25s in the Pacific, and who Sabbath had always secretly wished had been the one to be shot down. A bearded barrel he indisputably was, yet Drenka cooed ecstatically, "My American boyfriend. I have an American boyfriend," while the great Goodman performances of the 30s transformed into the pavilion of the Lorraine Avenue beach, the room reeking of disinfectant that he had rented for $6 in the name of Goodman's maniac trumpeter on We Three and the Angels Sing, Ziggy Elman. At the Lorraine Avenue Pavilion, Morty taught Mickey to jitterbug one August night in 1938 when the little boy who was his shadow was just 9, the kid's birthday present. Sabbath taught the girl from Split how to jitterbug on a snowy afternoon in 1981 in a motel in New England called the Bo Peep. By the time they left at 6 to drive in 2 cars, the plowed roads home, she could tell Harry James solos from Elman's on St. Louis Blues. She could imitate, very funnily, Hamp going ee-ee in that screechy way he did in the final solo of Ding Dong Daddy. She could knowingly say about Rollum what Morty used to knowingly say to Mickey about Rollum after the boogie-woogie beginning starts petering out in the Stacy solo. "It's really just a fast blues in F." She could even bang out on Sabbath's hairy hindquarters the Krupa tom-tom beat in her own accompaniment to Sweet Leilani. Martha Tilton taking over from Helen Ward, Dave Tuff taking over from Krupa, Bud Freeman coming in 38 from the Dorsey Band, Jimmy Monday from the Hines Band coming over as staff arranger. In one long winter afternoon at the Bo Peep, her American boyfriend had taught Drenka things she could never learn from the devoted husband whose pleasure that day was to be out all alone in the snow, building stone walls until it got too dark even to see his own breath. At Usher, a kindly, handsome doctor 20 years Sabbath's junior, assured him that if Rosanna cooperated with the program, she would be home and on the path to sobriety in 28 days. "Want to bet?" Sabbath said, and drove back to Madamascar Falls to kill Kathy. Ever since 3 a.m. when he learned how Rosanna, because of that tape, had stretched out on Town Street in her nightgown waiting to be run over, he had been planning to take Kathy to the top of Battle Mountain and strangle her. As a ripe, enormous pumpkin floated free from the darkening field across from the car, and the high drum of a full harvest moon began, Sabbath could not have said where he found the strength to refrain, as for the 5th time in as many minutes, she extended yet again the offer to entrap him, from either commencing the strangulation with his once powerful fingers, or going ahead and taking it out in a car for the 1,000,000th time in his life. "Kathy," he said, exhaustion giving him the sensation that he was glimmering and fading like a dying light bulb. "Kathy," he said, thinking as he watched the moon ascend that if only he'd had the moon on his side, things would have turned out differently. "Do us all a favor. Do Brian instead. That may even be what he's angling for by turning into a deaf mute. Didn't you say that the shock of hearing the tape has turned him into a deaf mute? Well, go home and sign him that you're going to blow him and see if his face doesn't light up." Not too hard on Sabbath, reader. Neither the turbulent inner talkathon nor the superabundance of self-subversion, nor the years of reading about death, nor the bitter experience of tribulation, loss, hardship, and grief make it any easier for a man of his type, perhaps for a man of any type, to get good use out of his brain when confronted by such an offer once, let alone when it is made repeatedly by a girl a third his age with an occlusion like Jean Tierney's and Laura. Don't be too hard on Sabbath for begin to think that maybe she was telling the truth, that she had left the tape in the library accidentally, that it had fallen into Kakumoto's hands accidentally, that she had been helpless to resist the pressures brought on her and had capitulated only to save her skin, as who among her peers, that was what she called her friends, would have done otherwise. She was really a sweet and decent kid, good-natured, involved, she had presumed, in some half-crazy but harmless extracurricular amusement, Professor Sabbath's audio-visual club. A large, graceless girl, ill-educated, coarse, and incoherent in the preferred style of the late 20th century undergraduate, but utterly without the shifty ruthlessness necessary for the vicious stunt he was charging her with. Maybe because he was so enraged and exhausted, a great misapprehension had taken hold of him, and he was falling victim to another of his stupid mistakes. Why would she be crying so pitifully for so long if she was conspiring against him? Why would she cling to his side like this if her true ties and affinities were with his super-virtuous antagonist and their angry, sinister, fixed ideas about what should and should not constitute an education for 20-year-old girls? She didn't begin to have Sabbath's skill at feigning what looked like genuine feeling. Or did she? Why else would she be begging to blow someone wholly alien to her, inessential to her, someone who was already a month into a 7th decade on Earth, if not to assert without equivocation that she was farcically, illogically, and incomprehensibly his? So little in life is knowable, reader. Don't be hard on Sabbath if he gets things wrong, or on Kathy if she gets things wrong. Many farcical, illogical, incomprehensible transactions are subsumed by the manias of lust. 20. Could I even survive saying no to 20? How many 20s are left? How many 30s and 40s are left? Under the sad end-of-days spell of the smoky dusk and the waning year, of the moon and its ostentatious superiority to all the trashy, petty claptrap of this sublunar existence, why does he even hesitate? The Kamizakis are your enemies whether you do anything or not, so you might as well do it. Yes, yes. If you can still do something, you must do it. That is the golden rule of sublunar existence, whether you are a worm cut in two or a man with a prostate like a billiard ball. If you can still do something, then you must do it. Anything living can figure that out. In Rome, he was now remembering, while Kathy continued her sobbing beside him, an elderly Italian puppeteer, said to have once been quite famous, had come to the school to judge a competition that Sabbath proceeded to win, and afterward the puppeteer, having given a demonstration of stale wizardry with a puppet looking exactly like himself, had asked young Sabbath to accompany him to a cafe in the Piazza del Popolo. The puppeteer was in his 70s, small, pudgy, and bald with a poor yellowish complexion, but so haughtily autocratic was his bearing that Sabbath spontaneously followed the example of his awestruck professor, and even enjoying, for a change, being deferential, albeit impudently so, he addressed the old man whose name meant nothing to him as maestro. In addition to his insufferable posturing, there was an ascot that half hid a substantial waddle, a beret that out of doors concealed the baldness, a stick with which he tapped the table to draw the attention of the waiter, and all of this readied Sabbath for a flood of boring old bohemian self-adoration that he would just have to endure for having won the prize. But instead, no sooner had the puppeteer ordered cognac for both of them than he said, "Dimmi di tutte le ragazze che ti sei scopato a Roma." Tell me about all the girls you fucked in Rome. And then, while Sabbath answered, speaking plainly and freely of the arsenal of allurement Italy was to him, describing how more than once he had been provoked to emulate the locals and follow someone clear across the city to nail down a pickup, the master's eyes were eloquent with a sardonic superiority that caused even the ex-merchant seaman, a veteran 6 times over the romance run, to feel a little like a model child. The old man's attention did not waver, however, nor did he interrupt other than to press for more elaboration than the American could always furnish in his limited Italian, and repeatedly to demand from Sabbath the precise age of each girl whose seduction he described. 18, replied Sabbath obediently. 20, maestro. 24, 21, 22. Only when Sabbath had finished did the maestro announce to him that his own current mistress was 15. Abruptly he rose to leave the cafe and to leave Sabbath with a check, but not before adding, with a derisive flick of his cane, "Naturalmente la conosco da quando aveva 12 anni. Of course, I've known her since she's 12. And only now, practically 40 years later, with Kathy still crying for him, and the oblivious blank of a moon still rising for him, with folks here in the hills and down in the valley settling in by the fire for a pleasant fall evening of listening on the phone to Kathy and him coming, did Sabbath believe that the old puppeteer had been telling the truth. 12. Capisco, maestro. You might as well go for broke. Catherine, he said sadly, you were once my most trusted accomplice in the fight for the lost human cause. Listen to me. Stop crying long enough to listen to what I have to say. Your people have on tape my voice giving reality to all the worst things they want the world to know about men. They have got 100 times more proof of my criminality than could be required by even the most lenient of deans to drive me out of every decent anti-phallic educational institution in America. Must I now ejaculate on CNN? Where is the camera? Is there a telephoto lens in that pickup truck over by the nursery? I've got my breaking point too, Kathy. If they send me up for sodomy, the result could be death. And that might not be as much fun for you as you may have been led to believe. You may have forgotten, but not even at Nuremberg was everyone sentenced to die. On he continued, in the circumstances, a lovely speech. It should be taped, thought he. Yes, on Sabbath went, developing with increasing cogency the argument in support of a constitutional amendment to make coming illegal for American men, regardless of race, creed, color, or ethnic origin, until Kathy cried out, "I'm of age!" and wiped her face dry of tears with the shoulder of her running jacket. "I do what I want," she angrily asserted. Maestro, what would you do? To peer down at her head cradled in your lap, your cock encircled by her foaming lips, and to watch her blowing you in tears, to patiently lather that undissipated face with that sticky confection of spit, semen, and tears, a delicate meringue icing her freckles. Could life bestow any more wonderful last thing? She had never looked more soulful to Sabbath, and he pointed this out to the maestro. She had never before looked soulful to Sabbath at all, but tears made her radiant, and even to the jaded maestro she seemed to be digging into a spiritual existence that was news to her as well. She was of age. Kathy Goolsby had just grown up. Yes, not only something spiritual, but something primordial was going on, as there had been on that hot summer day up in the picturesque brook beside the grotto when he and Drenka had pissed on each other. Oh, if only I could believe that you weren't in cahoots with these filthy, low-life, rectitudinous cunts who tell you children these terrible lies about men, about the sinister villainy of what is simply the ordinary grubbing about in reality of ordinary people like your dad and me. Because that is who they are against, honey. Me and your dad. That's what it comes down to. Caricaturing us, insulting us, abhorring in us what is nothing more than the delightful Dionysian underlayer of life. Tell me, how can you be against what has been inherently human going back to antiquity, going back to the virginal peak of Western civ, and call yourself a civilized person? Maybe it's because she's Japanese that she doesn't dig the unparalleled mythologies of ancient Attica. I don't get it otherwise. How would they like you to be sexually initiated? Intermittently by Brian while he takes poli-sci notes at the library? Are they going to leave it to a dry-as-dust scholar to initiate a girl like you? Or are you supposed to pick it up on your own? But if you're not expected to pick up chemistry on your own, if you're not expected to pick up physics on your own, then why are you supposed to pick up the erotic mysteries on your own? Some need seduction and don't need initiation. Some don't need initiation, but still need seduction. Kathy, you needed both. Harassment? I remember the good old days when patriotism was the last refuge of a scoundrel. Harassment? I have been Virgil to your Dante in the sexual underworld, but then how would those professors know who Virgil is? I want, she said yearningly, to suck you so hard. That's so. And yet hearing the so intensifying so, feeling the familiar lifelong urge to crude, natural, bodily satisfaction creep uncontrollably across every square inch of his 2 square yards of yearning old hide, Sabbath thought not as he would have hoped of his estimable mentor, the unplatitudinous maestro, obedient to the end to the edict of excitement, but of his sick wife suffering in the hospital. Of all people, it isn't fair. The 29 as stiff as a horse's, and who should he start thinking about but Rosanna? He saw before him the little cell of a room to which they'd assigned her after admission, a room beside the nurse's station where she could conveniently be observed during the 24-hour detox watch. They would take her blood pressure every half hour, do what they could for the shakes she was going to have because she had been drinking steadily for the previous 3 days, drinking hard right up to the hospital door. He saw her standing beside that narrow bed with the sad chenille spread, so stoop-shouldered that she looked no taller than he was. On the bed lay her suitcases, 2 pleasant, ununiformed nurses who had asked her politely to open them for inspection, meticulously went through her things, removing her eyebrow tweezers, her nail scissors, her hair dryer, her dental floss so she wouldn't stab, electrocute, or hang herself, impounding a bottle of Listerine so she would not drink it all down in desperation, or smash the bottle or use the shards to slit her wrists or cut her throat, examining everything in her wallet and extracting from it her credit cards, driver's license, and all her cash, so she could not buy contraband whiskey smuggled into the hospital, or wander off grounds to a bar in Usher Village, or jumpstart a staff member's car and head home, rummaging through all the jeans, sweaters, underwear, and jogging stuff. All the while Rosanna, lost, lifeless, immensely alone, hollowly looked on, her aging, folk-singerish good looks demolished, a woman decarnalized, simultaneously a pre-erotic juvenile and a post-erotic wreck. She might have been living all these years, not in a simple box of a house where every fall the deer fed off the apple trees in the hillside orchard beyond the screened porch, but locked away inside an automatic car wash where there was no hiding from the battering rain and the big turning brushes and the gaping blowers pouring forth their hot air. Rosanna, restored to its roots, in stripped to its skin, nickel and dime, down-to-earth reality, the exalted phrase, the bludgeonings of fate. "The cause," sobbed Rosanna, "goes free. The effect goes to jail." "Isn't that life exactly?" he agreed. "Only it's not a jail, it's a hospital, Rosie, and a hospital that doesn't even look like one. And as soon as you stop suffering, you'll see that it's very pretty, like a big country inn. There are a lot of trees and nice walks to walk on with your friends. I noticed driving in that there is even a tennis court. I'll send you a racket, Federal Express." "Why are they taking my Visa card?" "Because you don't pay nightmare by nightmare and tremor by tremor. As your Catholic upbringing should have taught you, you pay through the nose at the end." "Well, it's your things they should be searching. They'd come up with enough to put you away for good." "You want the nurses to do that? To search me? For what?" "The handcuffs you use on your teenage whore." 20, Sabbath thought to inform the 2 nurses, no longer a teenager, unfortunately. But neither nurse appeared the least bit amused or appalled by the Sabbath's farewell banter, and so he didn't bother. Foul language and loud shouting the nurses had heard before. The drunk, frenetic, terrified, extremely angry at the mate even angrier with the drunk. Husbands and wives yelling and screaming and accusing were nothing new to them, nothing new to anyone. You don't have to work in a mental hospital to know about husbands and wives. He watched the nurses dutifully checking each and every pocket of all Rosanna's jeans for a stray joint or a razor blade. They impounded her keys. Good. This was in her own best interest. Now there was no chance of her bursting unannounced into the house. He wouldn't have wanted Rosanna in her condition to have to deal with Drinka, too. Let's deal first with the addiction. You should be locked up, Mickey, and everyone who knows you knows it. I'm sure one day they will lock me up, if that truly is the consensus. But let the others see to that. You just get sober real quick now, you hear? You don't want me sober. You prefer a drunk, so you can seem, he whispered to help her over the hump. Her S's always bested her when she mixed her rage with more than a quart of vodka. Seem to be the long-suffering husband? Yes. No. Sympathy isn't my bag, you know that. I don't ask to seem as anything other than what I am. So tell me again what that is. I wouldn't want to forget during the days we're apart. A failure. A fucking non-stop failure. A scheming, lying, sick, deceiving, total failure who lives off his wife and fucks children. And he's the one, she weepingly told the nurses, who put me here. I was fine till I met him. I wasn't this at all. And he rushed to reassure her, in only 28 days it'll all be over, and you'll be just the way you were before I made you into this. He raised his hand beside his face to shyly wave goodbye. You cannot leave me here, she cried. The doctor said I get to see you after the first 2 weeks. What if they give me shock treatment? For drinking, I don't think they do that, do they, nurse? No. All they give you is a new outlook on life. I'm sure all they want you to do is drop your illusions and adapt to reality, like me. Bye-bye. 2 little weeks. I'll be counting the days, said Rosie's old self. But then, when she saw that he really was going to leave her there, something from within contorted her spiteful smile into a knotted lump, and she began to wail. This sound accompanied Sabbath along the corridor and down the flight of stairs and out the main hospital door, where a group of patients were having a smoke and looking upstairs to see in which of the rooms the new wailer was suffering. It accompanied him to the parking lot and into the car, then out onto the highway. It was with him all the way back to Madamascar Falls. Louder and louder, Sabbath played the tapes, but even Goodman couldn't cancel it out. Even Goodman, Krupa, Wilson, and Hampton in their heyday, breaking loose with Runnin' Wild. Even Krupa, opening dramatically out with the bass drum on that last great chorus, couldn't obliterate Rosanna's 8-bar solo flourish. A wife going off like a siren. The second crazy wife. Was there any other kind? Not for him. A second crazy wife who'd begun life hating her father and then discovered Sabbath to hate instead. But then Kathy loved her protective, self-sacrificing dad who'd worked day and night in the bakery to put 3 Goolsby kids into college. And a lot of good it did her, or Sabbath. I can't win. No one can when they follow Father with me. If it was Rosanna's wail earlier in the day that gave Sabbath the determination to decline what he had never before declined in his life, then that was a truly record-breaking wail. Time to go home and blow Bryant. Now, this isn't fair. I didn't do anything. Go home or I'll kill you. Don't say that, my God. You would not be the first woman I killed. Sure. Who was? Nikki Kantarakis, my first wife. That's not funny. True enough. Murdering Nikki constitutes my sole claim to real gravitas. Or was it pure fun? I'm never entirely convinced by my assessment of anything. That ever happened to you? Jesus, like, what are you even talking about? I'm only talking about what everybody talks about. You know what they say at the college. They say I had a wife who disappeared, but that she didn't just disappear. Can you deny you've heard 'em say it? Can you, Kathy? Well, people say everything, don't they? I don't even remember. Who even listens? Sparing my feelings, isn't that nice? But you needn't. You learn by 60 to accept in a sporting spirit the derision of virtuous bystanders. Besides, they happen to have it right, thus proving that if, when speaking of a fellow creature, you give continual expression to your antipathy, a strange kind of truth may unfold. Why don't you say anything seriously to me? I have never said anything more seriously to anyone. I killed a wife. Please stop this. You telephoned to play doctor on the phone with somebody who killed his wife. I did not. What drives you anyway? At the highest levels of higher education, my identity as a murderer has been laid bare, and you phone to tell me that you are in your PJs, all alone in bed. What's inside of you, scorching you? Your bondage is bondage to what? I am a notorious killer or diller who strangled his wife. Why else would I have to live in a place like this if I hadn't strangled somebody? I did it with these very hands while we were rehearsing in our bedroom, on our bed, the final act of Othello. My wife was a young actress. Othello, it's a play. It's a play in which an African Venetian strangles his white wife to death. You never heard of it because it perpetuates the stereotype of the violent black male. But back in the 50s, humanity hadn't figured out yet what was important, and students fell prey in college to a lot of wicked shit. Nikki was terrified of every new role. She suffered insufferable fears. One was of men. Unlike you, she was not wily in the ways of men. This made her perfect for the part. We rehearsed beforehand alone in our apartment to try to reduce Nikki's fears. I can't do it. This I heard from her many times. I played the stereotypical violent black male. In the scene in which he murders her, I did it. I went ahead and murdered her, got carried away by the spell of her acting. It just opened up something in me to see it. Someone to whom the tangible and the immediate are repugnant, to whom the illusion is fully real. This was the order Nikki made of her chaos, and you, what is the order you make of yours? Talking about your tits to an old man on the phone. You elude description, at least by me. Such a shameless creature, and yet so bland. Perverse and treacherous, the French kiss of death, already deep into the disreputable thrills of a double life, and bland. As chaos goes, yours seems decidedly unchaotic. The chaos theorists ought to study you. How deep does what Catherine does or says reach down into Catherine? Whatever you want, however dangerous or deceitful, you pursue, like impersonally, you know. Okay, how did you kill her? Lifting his hands, he said, I used these, I told you. Put out the light and then put out the light. What'd you do with the body? I rented a boat at Sheepshead Bay, a harbor in Brooklyn. I was a sailor boy once. I loaded the body down with bricks and dumped Nikki overboard out at sea. How did you get a dead body to Brooklyn? I was always carrying things around. I had an old Dodge in those days, and I was always shoving into the trunk my portable stage and my props and my puppets. The neighbors saw me coming and going all the time like that. Nikki was a string bean. She didn't weigh much. I stuffed her, doubled over into my seaman's bag. No big deal. I don't believe you. Too bad, because I've never told anyone before, not even Rosanna. And now I've told you, and as our little scandal teaches us, telling you isn't exactly observing the dictates of prudence. Who do you tell first? Dean Koozy-Doozy? Or will you go straight to the Japanese High Command? Why must you be so racially prejudiced against Japanese? Because of what they did to Alec Guinness in the bridge on the River Kwai, putting him in that fucking little box. I hate the bastards. Who will you tell first? No one. I'm not telling anyone, because it's not true. And if it were, would you tell anyone then? What? If you really were a murderer? Yes. And if you knew I was, would you turn me in the way you turned in the tape? I forgot got the tape. I left the tape accidentally. Would you turn me in, Kathy? Yes or no? Why must I answer these questions? Because it's indispensable to my finding out just who the fuck you are working for. No one. Would you turn me in, yes or no, if it were true that I was a murderer? Well, you want a serious answer? I'll take what I get. Well, it would depend. On? Well, on our relationship. You might not turn me in if we had the right relationship. And what would that be? Describe it. I don't know. I guess love. You would protect a murderer if you loved him? I don't know. You never murdered anyone. These questions are stupid. Do you love me? Don't worry about my feelings. Do you love me? In a way. Yes? Yes. Old and loathsome as I am, I love your mind. I love how you expose your mind when you talk. My mind? My mind is a murderer's mind. Oh, stop saying that. You're scaring me. My mind? Well, this is quite a revelation. I thought you loved my ancient penis. My mind? This is quite a shock for a man of my years. You were really only in it from my mind? Oh, no! All the time I was talking about fucking, you were watching me expose my mind, paying unwanted attention to my mind. You dared to introduce a mental element into a setting where it has no place. Help! I've been mentally harassed! Help! I'm the victim of mental harassment. God, I'm getting a gastrointestinal disorder. You have extracted mental favors from me without my even knowing, and against my will. I have been belittled by you. My dick has been belittled by you. Call the dean. My dick has been disempowered. With this, Kathy finally found the initiative to push open the door, but so frantically, with such force, that she tumbled from the car to the shoulder of the road. But she was up on her Reeboks almost immediately and, through the windshield, could be seen speeding north toward Athena. Puppets can fly, levitate, twirl, but only people and marionettes are confined to running and walking. That's why marionettes always bored him. All that walking they were always doing up and down the tiny stage, as though, in addition to being the subject of every marionette show, walking were the major theme of life. All the strings, too visible, too many, too blatantly metaphorical, and always slavishly imitating human theater, whereas puppets, shoving your hand up a puppet and hiding your face behind the screen, nothing like it in the animal kingdom. All the way back to Petrushka. Anything goes, the crazier and uglier the better. Sabbath's cannibal puppet that won first prize from the maestro in Rome, eating his enemies on the stage, tearing them apart and talking about them all the while they were chewed and swallowed. The mistake is to ever think that to act and speak is the natural domain of anyone other than a puppet. Contentment is being hands and a voice. Looking to be more, students, is madness. If Nikki had been a puppet, she might still be alive. And down the road, Kathy fleeing by the oversized light of the preposterous moon. And the smokers now gathered in the moonlight, too, beneath the cell of the detoxing Rosanna. Those wailings could still be heard 130 miles away. Oh, she was in for it tonight, up against an even more horrifying trial than being married to him. The doctor had warned Sabbath that she might telephone to beg him to get her out. He counseled Sabbath to ignore the bidding of compassion and tell her no. Sabbath promised to do his best. Rather than head home to hear her ringing, he sat a while longer in the car, where, for reasons he couldn't figure out right off, he was remembering the guy who'd given him those books to read on the Standard Oil tanker, remembering how they unloaded through that great piping system at Curacao, and how that guy, one of those gentlemanly, quiet types who mysteriously spend their lives at sea when you would expect them to wind up as teachers or even maybe ministers, had given him a book of poems by William Butler Yeats. A loner, a self-educated loner. The guy's silences gave you the creeps. Another American type. One met all our American types at sea, even by that time a good many of them Hispanic, tough, really tough Latino types. I remember one who looked like Akim Tamaroff. All kinds of our colored brothers, every type you can think of, sweet men, not so sweet men, everybody. There was a big, fat, black cook on that ship where the guy who gave me that book started me off reading. I'd be lying on my top bunk with a book, and this cook would always come in and grab my balls and start laughing. I'd have to wrestle him away. Guess that makes me homophobic. He didn't make any more aggressive moves, but he would have been very pleased if I'd responded, no doubt about that. Interesting thing was that I used to see him in the whorehouses. Now, the guy who gave me the poetry was out-and-out queer, yet never laid a glove on me, pretty green-eyed lad though I was. Told me which poems to read. Gave me a lot of books. Awfully nice of him, really. Guy from Nebraska. I'd memorized the poems on my watch. Of course, Yeats to Lady Gouldsby. I heard an old religious man but yesternight declare that he had found a text to prove that only God, my dear, could love you for yourself alone and not your yellow hair. In only a few hours, Kathy would be crossing the finish line. He could see her taping her breasts and falling in the embrace of the immaculate Kamazoko, breasting the tape. Kazizomi, Kazikomi. Who could remember their fucking names? Who wanted to? Tojo and Hirohito sufficed for him. Sobbing hysterically, she would tell the dean of his terrifying confession, and the dean might not resist believing as Kathy had pretended to do. Driving home, he played the Sheik of Araby. Few things in this world as right as those 4 zippy solos. Clarinet, piano, drums, vibes. How come nobody hates Tojo anymore? Nobody remembers that killer except me. They think Tojo's a car. But ask the Koreans about the Japanese sitting on their faces for 35 years. Ask the Manchurians about the civility of their conquerors. Ask the Chinese about the wonderful understanding shown them by those little flat-faced imperialist bastards. Ask about the brothels the Japs stocked for their soldiers with girls just like you, younger. The dean thinks I'm the enemy? Ho-ho! Ask her about the boys back home and how they bravely fucked their way through Asia, the foreign women they enslaved and made into whores. Ask them in Manila about the bombs, tons of bombs, dropped by Japs after Manila was an open city. Where is Manila? How would you know? Maybe one day teacher will take an hour off from harassment lessons to mention to all her spotless lambs a little horror called World War II. The Japanese as racially arrogant as anyone anywhere. Besides them, the Ku Klux Klan is... But how would you know about the Ku Klux Klan? How would you know about anything given whose clutches you're in? You want the lowdown on the Japanese? Ask my mother, also a woman harassed in life. Ask her. Expansively, he sang along with the quartet, pretending to be Gene Hochberg, who could really get a crowd of kids up and swinging. Delighting himself, Sabbath was not just in the multi-demeaning lyric of the old 20s anthem, celebrating date rape and denigrating Arabs, but in the unending, undecorous, needling performance, the joy of the job of being their savage. How could the missionaries puff themselves up without their savage? Their naive fucking impertinence about carnal lusting, seducer of the young, Socrates, Strindberg, and me, yet feeling great all the same. The glassy chiming of Hampton's hammering, that could fix about anything. Or maybe it was having Rosie out of the way. Or maybe it was knowing that he'd never had to please and wasn't starting now. Yes, he felt uncontrollable tenderness for his own shit-filled life. And a laughable hunger for more defeat, more disappointment, more deceit, more loneliness, more arthritis, more missionaries, God willing, more cunt, more disastrous entanglement in everything. For a pure sense of being tumultuously alive, you can't beat the nasty side of existence. I may not have been a matinee idol, but say what you will about me, it's been a real human life. I'm the Sheik of Araby. Your love belongs to me. At night, when you're asleep, into your tent I'll creep. The stars that shine above will light our way to love. You'll rule the land with me. I'm the Sheik of Araby. Life is impenetrable. For all Sabbath knew, he had just thrown over a girl who had neither betrayed nor bewitched him, and never could. A simple, adventurous girl who loved her father and never would deceive any grown man, except father with Sabbath. For all he knew, he had just frightened off the last 20-year-old into whose tent he would ever again creep. He had mistaken innocent, loving, loyal Cordelia for her villainous sisters, Goneril and Regan. He'd got it as backward as old Lear. Lucky for his sanity, there was some consolation to be had in the big bed up on Brick Furnace Road by fucking Drenka there that night, and the 27 nights to follow. The only communication Sabbath received during the 2 weeks before he was allowed to visit Rosanna was a resoundingly factual postcard sent to him from Usher at the end of her first week there. No salutation, and mailed simply to their street address in Madamascar Falls. She would not even write his name. Meet me at Roderick House, 23rd, 4:30 p.m., dinner at 5:15. I have AA meetings 7 to 8 p.m. Stay Ragged Hill Lodge in Usher if you don't want to drive home same night. RCS. Just as he was getting into the car at 1:30 on the 23rd, the phone rang in the house, and he raced back through the kitchen door, thinking that it must be Drenka. When he heard Rosanna reversing the charges, he figured she was calling to ask him not to come. He'd phoned Drenka with the news as soon as she hung up. "How are you, Rosanna?" Her voice, never highly inflected, was ironed flat, stern and angry, and flat. "Are you coming?" "I was just getting into the car. I had to run back into the house to get the phone." "I want you to bring something." "Please," she added, as though someone were there instructing her on what to say and how to say it. "Bring something, of course," he said. "Anything." Her reply to this was a harsh, unscripted laugh, followed icily by, "In my file, top drawer at the back, a blue 3-ring binder. I have to have it." "I'll bring it, but I'll have to get into the file." "You'll need the key," more icily still, if that could be possible. "Yes. Where would I find it?" "In my riding boots, the left boot." But over the years he'd searched through all her boots, shoes, and sneakers. She must have moved it there recently from wherever it had been hidden from him before. "Go get it now," she said. "Find it now. It's important. Please." "Sure. Okay. The right boot." "The left!" No, it wasn't hard to make her lose hold. And that was with 2 weeks already under her belt and only 2 to go. He found the key and from the file got the blue 3-ring binder and came back to the phone to assure her he had it. "Did you lock the file?" He lied and said yes. "Bring the key with you, the file key. Please." "Of course." "And the binder, it's blue? There are 2 elastic bands around it?" "Got it right here." "Please don't lose it," she exploded. "It's a matter of life and death." "Are you sure you really want it?" "Don't argue with me. Do as I ask you. It's not easy for me even to talk to you." "Would you rather I didn't come?" He wondered if it would be safe at this hour to drive by the inn and blow the horn twice, their signal for Drenka to meet him at the grotto. "If you don't want to come," she said, "don't. You're not doing anyone a favor. If you're not interested in seeing me, that is fine with me." "I am interested in seeing you. That's why I was in the car when you called." "How do you feel? Are you any better?" She answered in a wavering voice. "It isn't easy." "I'm sure it isn't." "It's damn hard." She began to cry. "It's impossibly hard." "Are you making headway at all?" "Oh, you don't understand. You'll never understand," she shouted and hung up. In the binder were the letters that her father had sent her after she had left him to go live with her mother, following her mother's return from France. He'd written a letter to Rosanna every single day right up to the evening that he killed himself. The suicide letter was addressed both to Rosanna and to the younger sister, Ella. Rosanna's mother had gathered the letters to her daughter together and had kept them for them until she herself had died after a long ordeal with emphysema the year before. The binder had been bequeathed to Rosanna along with her mother's antiques, and she had never been able even to remove the elastic bands holding it shut. For a while she was determined to throw it out, but she could not do that either. Halfway to Usher, Sabbath stopped at a highway diner. He held the binder in his lap until the waitress brought him coffee. Then he removed the elastic bands, placed them carefully in his jacket pocket, and opened to the letters. The letter, written only hours before he hanged himself, was headed, "My beloved children, Rosanna and Ella," and dated Cambridge, September 15, 1950. Rosie was 13. Professor Kavanaugh's last letter, Sabbath read first. Cambridge, September 15, 1950. My beloved children, Rosanna and Ella. I say beloved in spite of everything. I have always tried to do my best, but I have failed completely. I have failed in my marriages, and I have failed in my work. When your mother left us, I became a broken man, and when even you, my beloved children, abandoned me, everything ended. Since then I have had total insomnia. I have no strength any longer. I am exhausted, and I am ill from all the sleeping pills. I cannot go on any longer. God help me. Please do not judge me too harshly. Live happily. Dad. Cambridge, February 6, 1950. Dear little Rosanna, you cannot imagine how I miss my beloved little darling. I feel completely empty inside, and I don't know how I'll get over it. But at the same time, I feel that it was important and necessary that it happen. I have seen the change in you since May of last year. I was terribly worried since I could not help you, and you did not wish to confide in me. You bottled yourself up and pushed me away. I did not know that you had such a hard time in school, but I suspected as much since your classmates never visited you. Only pretty little Helen Kiley came sometimes and picked you up in the morning. But my little dear one, the fault was yours. You felt superior, and you showed it maybe more than you knew yourself. This is exactly the same thing that happened to your mother with her friends here. My dear little Rosanna, I do not say this to accuse you, but so that you can think through all this and eventually discuss it with your mother. And then you'll learn that in life one must not be selfish. Cambridge, February 8, 1950. You had lost contact with your father, and I could no longer penetrate the armor by which you surrounded yourself. It worried me so deeply. I understood that you needed a mother. I even tried to get you one, but that failed totally. Now you have your real mother back, whom you so long have missed. Now you have all the possibilities again to become well. This will give you new courage to live, and you will be happy again with school. In intelligence, you are way, way above the average. Your father's home remains open for you whenever you want to return, for a shorter or longer period of time. You are my most beloved child, and the emptiness is enormous without you. I shall try to gain solace thinking that what happened was best for you. Please write me something as soon as you are settled. Goodbye, my little darling. 1,000 loving kisses from your lonely Dad. Cambridge, February 9, 1950. My dear little Rosanna, I ran into Miss Learman on the street. She was sad that you left the school. She said that all the teachers liked you so much, but she understood that you had a difficult time lately, infections, etc., which forced you to be absent for long periods. She also noted that lately you hadn't been together with Helen Kiley or your other nice friends, Myra, Phyllis, and Aggie. But she said these girls were committed to their studies while Rosanna has lost the desire to succeed. She hoped that you would get over your difficulties in a few years. She had seen many similar cases, she said. She also felt strongly, as I do, that a girls' school is better for girls in puberty. Unfortunately, your mother does not seem to share Miss Lehrman's opinion. Yes, dear little Rosanna, I hope you'll soon be as happy as when you were my sunshine, truthful and straightforward. But then our problems began. I wanted to help you, but I couldn't since you didn't want my help. You couldn't confide your worries to me any longer. Then you needed a mother, but then you did not have a mother, unfortunately. A huge hug from Dad. Cambridge, February 10, 1950. Dear Rosanna, you promised to call and write often to me when you left. You were so sweet and open, and I believed you. But love is blind. Now 5 days have passed since you left, and I have not had one line from you. Neither did you want to speak to me last night, even though I was home. I am beginning to understand. My eyes are opening. Do you have a bad conscience? Can you no longer look your father in the eye? Is that the thank you for all I have done for you during these 5 years when I alone had to take care of my children? It is cruel. It is horrible. Can you ever again come home to your father and look him in the eye? I can hardly grasp this, but I do not judge you. I understand that lately you have been under hypnosis. Your mother seems to have made it her mission to harass me to the utmost. Her only interest is my defeat. She does not seem to have changed as much as you children seem to think. Maybe you will write a few lines and tell me what I should do. Shall I clean out your room and try to forget that you ever existed? Why did you lie to me at the stationery store about the $10? It was unnecessary. Not a beautiful last memory. Dad. Cambridge, February 11, 1950. Dearest little Rosanna, 1,000 thank yous for your longed-for letter today. It made me so happy that now I feel like another person. The sun is shining again over my broken life. Please forgive my last letter. I was so depressed when I wrote it that I barely believed I could stand up again. But today everything feels different. Irene has now become so kind that I would even say she is sweet. She has probably helped me over the worst crisis, your departure. Of course you are welcome so long as you do not completely cut off contact with your father. And now, since things here at home are calm and peaceful again, your letters will be heartily welcome to us all. Please write often as you can to us. It doesn't have to be a long epistle, just a short greeting that you are fine. Though sometimes you must write some lines to your father telling him how you feel in the depths of your soul, especially when your sorrows drag you down. Dearest, dearest, dearest regards from us all, but especially from your loving Dad. This was the way the letters went from the February day in 1950 when Rosanna moved from Cambridge with Ella to live with her mother through the end of April, which was as far as Sabbath was able to read if he intended to be on time for dinner at the hospital. He was sure to hear the same despondent message being beeped right on down to the end anyway. The world against him, obstructing him, insulting and crushing him. Shall I clean out your room and try to forget that you ever existed? From bleeding Professor Kavanaugh to his 13-year-old beloved, after not having heard from her for 5 days. A suffering, crazy drunk. Couldn't have been battle-free one day of his life until the day the stone was lifted. Please do not judge me harshly. Live happily, Dad. And then, no longer out of tune with a thing. Everything at last under control. Sabbath pulled into the hospital parking lot just before 5. On foot, he made his way up a circular drive that separated a wide bowl of green lawn from a long 3-storied white clapboard house with black shuttered windows at the top of the hill, the hospital's main building, designed, coincidentally enough, very much in the style of the Balich's colonial-style inn overlooking Lake Madamascar. In the last century, there'd been a lake here, too, where now there was a lake-like lawn, and looming above it a massive Gothic mansion that had fallen into ruin after the death of the childless owners. After the roof gave way, then the stone walls, until in 1909 the lake was drained and the spookily picturesque pile was pushed into the hole with a steam shovel and covered over to make way for a TB sanatorium. Today, the old sanatorium was the main building of Usher Psychiatric Hospital, but continued to be referred to as the mansion. Doubtless because the dinner hour was approaching, the crowd of smokers gathered outside the front door of the mansion numbered 20 or 25, a handful of them surprisingly young, boys and girls in their teens who were dressed like students in the valley, boys with their baseball caps on backward, and the girls in college T-shirts, running shoes, and jeans. He asked the prettiest of the girls, who would also have been the tallest if she had only stood up straight, to direct him to Roderick House, and observed when she raised her arm to point the way a horizontal slash mark across her wrist that looked to be only recently healed. An ordinary autumn late afternoon, which is to say radiant and extraordinary. How horrible, how dangerous this beauty must be to someone suicidally depressed. Yet the kind of day, thought Sabbath, that perhaps makes it possible for a garden-variety depressive to believe that the cavern through which he is crawling may be leading in the direction of life. Childhood at its very best is recalled, and the abatement, if not of adulthood, at least of dread, seems for the moment possible. Autumn at the psychiatric hospital, autumn and its famous meanings. How can it be autumn if I am here? How can I be here if it is autumn? Is it autumn? The year began in magical transition, and it does not even register. Roderick House lay just off the bottom of a turning of the road that ringed the lawn and led back out on the county highway. The house was a smaller, two-story version of the mansion, one of 7 or 8 such houses set irregularly back among the trees, each with an open veranda and grassy front yard. Coming upon Roderick House from the rise of the drive, Sabbath saw 4 women sitting on outdoor furniture pulled close together on the lawn. The one reclining in the white plastic chaise was his wife. She was wearing sunglasses and lying perfectly still, while around her the others were in lively conversation. But then something so funny was said by someone, perhaps even by Rosanna, that she sprang to a sitting position and clapped her hands together with joy. Her laugh was more spontaneous than he'd heard it for years. They were all still laughing when Sabbath appeared, walking across the lawn. One of the women leaned toward Rosanna. "Your visitor," she whispered. "Good day," said Sabbath, and formally bowed to them. "I am the beneficiary of Rosanna's nest-building instinct and the embodiment of all the resistance she encounters in life. I am sure each of you has an unworthy mate. I am hers. I am Mickey Sabbath. Everything you have heard about me is true. Everything is destroyed, and I destroyed it. Hello, Rosie." It did not astonish him when she failed to pop up out of the chair to embrace him, but when she took off the sunglasses and shyly said, "Hi," well, the voice on the phone had not led him to expect such loveliness. Only 14 days off the sauce and away from him, and she looked 35. Her skin was clear and tawny. Her shoulder-length hair shone more golden than brown, and she seemed even to have recovered the width of her mouth and that appealing width between her eyes. She had a notably broad face, but her features had been vanishing within it for years. Here lay the simple origin of their suffering, her knockout girl-next-door looks. In just 14 days she had cast off 2 decades of bungled life. "These," she said awkwardly, "are some residents of the house. Helen, Kylie, Myra, Phyllis, Aggie. Would you like to see my room? We've got a little time." She was now an utterly disconcerted child, too embarrassed by a parent's presence to be anything but miserable so long as he remained among her friends. He followed Rosanna up the stairs to the veranda, 3 smokers out there, youngish women like the ones on the lawn, and into the house. They passed a small kitchen and turned down a corridor lined with notices and newspaper clippings. To one side, the corridor opened onto a small, dark living room where another group of women were watching TV, and to the other onto the nurses' station, partitioned in glass and cheerily hung with peanuts posters above the 2 desks. Rosanna pulled him halfway through the door. "My husband's here," she said to the young nurse on duty. "Fine," replied the nurse, and nodded politely to Sabbath, whom Rosanna immediately dragged away before he told the nurse, too, that everything was destroyed and he had destroyed it, right on the money though that indictment might be. "Rosanna!" a friendly voice called from the living room. "Rosanna Banana!" "Hi." "Back to Bennington," said Sabbath. Bitterly she jumped at him. "Not quite." Her room was small, freshly painted a sparkling white, with 2 curtained windows looking onto the front yard, a single bed, an old wooden desk, and a dresser. All anyone needed, really. You could live in a place like this forever. He stuck his head into the bathroom, turned on a tap. "Hot water," he said approvingly, and then, when he came out, saw on the desk 3 framed photographs, one of her mother wrapped in a fur coat in Paris just after the war, The old one of Ella and Paul with their two plump blonde children, Eric and Paula, and a third, Glenn, plainly on the way, and a photograph that he had never seen before, a studio portrait of a man in a suit, tie, and starched collar, a stern, broad-faced, middle-aged man who did not look at all broken, but could be no one but Kavanaugh. There was a composition notebook open on the desk, and Rosanna closed it with one quivering hand while she nervously circled the room. "Where's the binder?" she said. "You forgot the binder." She was no longer the sylph in sunglasses he'd seen on the lawn, laughing merrily with Helen, Myra, Phyllis, and Aggie. "I left it locked in the car. It's under the seat. It's safe." "And what," she cried in all seriousness, "if somebody steals the car?" "Is that likely, Rosanna? That car?" "I was hurrying to be on time. I thought we'd get it after dinner, but I'll leave whenever you want me to. I'll get the binder and leave now if you want me to. You looked great until 2 minutes ago. I'm no good for your complexion." "I planned to show you the place. I wanted to take you around. I did. I want to show you where I swim. Now I'm confused, terribly. I feel hollow. I feel awful." Sitting on the edge of her bed, she began to sob. It's $1,000 a day here," were the words she managed finally to utter. "Is that what you're crying about?" "No, the insurance covers it." "And what is making you cry?" Tomorrow night at the meeting, I have to tell my story. It's my turn. I've been making notes. I'm terrified. For days I've been making notes. I'm nauseated. My stomach hurts." "Why be terrified? Pretend you're talking to your class. Pretend they're just your kids." "I'm not terrified of speaking," she replied angrily. "It's what I'm saying. It's my saying the truth." "About?" She couldn't believe his stupidity. About him," she cried, pointing to her father's picture. "That man." "So it's that man. It's him." Innocently enough, Sabbath asked, "What did he do?" Everything. The dining room on the first floor of the mansion was pleasant and quiet and bright, with light from the bay windows that looked out across the lawn. The patients sat where they liked, mostly at oak tables large enough for 8, but a few stayed apart at tables along the wall that seated 2. Again, he was reminded of the inn at the lake and the pleasant mood of the dining room there when Drenka officiated as high priestess. Unlike the customers at the inn, the patients served themselves from a buffet table where tonight there were French fried potatoes, green beans, cheeseburgers, salad, and ice cream. $1,000 a day cheeseburgers. Whenever Rosanna got up to refill her glass of cranberry juice, one or another of those drying out and crowded together at the juice machine smiled at her or spoke to her, and as she passed with yet another full glass, someone at a table took hold of her free hand, because tomorrow night she had to tell my story, or because tonight he was here. He wondered if anyone at Usher, patient, doctor, or nurse, had as yet dialed across the state line to get an earful of what had put her here. Only it was the father who had done everything, who had put her here. How come she'd never told him of this everything before? Hadn't she dared speak of it? Hadn't she dared to remember it? Or did the charge so clarify for her the history of her misery that whether it was truly rooted in fact was a cruelly irrelevant question? At last she possessed the explanation that was at once exalted and hideous and, by Zeitgeist standards, more than reasonable. But where, if anywhere any longer, was a true picture of the past? "You cannot imagine how I miss my beloved little darling. I feel completely empty inside, and I don't know how I'll get over it. You are my most beloved child, and the emptiness is enormous without you. Only pretty little Helen Kiley came sometimes. When you were my sunshine, truthful and straightforward. You were so sweet and open, and I believed you. But love is blind. Do you have a bad conscience? Can you no longer look your father in the eye? Your longed-for letter. The sun is shining again over my broken life." Who had hanged himself in that Cambridge attic? A bereft father or a spurned lover? At dinner, By talking continuously, she seemed able to pretend that Sabbath wasn't there, or that whoever was sitting opposite was somebody else. "See the woman," she whispered, "2 tables behind me, petite, thin, glasses, early 50s. And she synopsized the story of her marital disaster, a second family, a 25-year-old girlfriend and 2 little children, 3 and 4. The husband had secretly stashed away in the next town. "See the girl with the braids? Red-haired, lovely, smart, 25, Wellesley, construction worker boyfriend. Looks like the Marlboro man," she says. Throws her up against the wall and down the stairs, and she can't stop phoning him. Phones every night. Says she's trying to get him to feel some remorse. No luck yet. See that dark, youngish guy, working class, 2 tables to your left? A glazer. Sweet guy. Wife hates his family and won't let him take the children to see them. Wanders around all day talking to himself. It's useless. It's hopeless. It's never going to change. The shouting, the scenes, can't take it. All you hear in the morning are people crying in the rooms, crying and saying, "I wish I were dead." See the guy there? Tall, bald, big-nosed guy in the silk robe? Gay. Room full of perfumes. Wears his robe all day. Always carrying a book. Never comes to program. Tries to kill himself every September. Comes here every October. Goes home every November. He's the only man in Roderick. One morning, I passed his room and heard him sobbing inside. I went in and sat down on the bed. He told me his story. His mother died 3 weeks after he was born, rheumatic heart. He didn't know how she died until he was 12. She was warned beforehand about pregnancy, but had him anyway and died. He thought he killed her. His first memory is of sitting in a car with his father, being driven from one home to another. They changed residences all the time. When he was 5, his father moved in with a couple, friends. His father stayed there 32 years, had a secret love affair with the wife. The couple had 2 daughters he considers his sisters. One is his sister. He's an architectural draftsman, lives by himself, sends for pizza every night, eats it watching television. Saturday nights, he makes himself something special, a veal dish. He stammers. You can barely hear him when he speaks. I held his hand for about an hour. He was crying and crying. Finally he says, "When I was 17, my mother's brother came, my uncle, and he couldn't finish. He can't tell anybody what happened when he was 17. Still can't, and he's 53. That's Ray. One person's story is worse than the next. They want internal quiet, and all they get's internal noise." So she continued until they had finished their ice cream, whereupon she jumped to her feet, and together they headed for her father's letters. Walking rapidly beside her down the drive to the parking lot, Sabbath spotted a modern building of glass and pink brick on a crest off to the back of the mansion. "A lockup," Rosanna told him. "It's where they detox the ones that come in with DTs. It's where they give you shock. I don't even like to look at it. I said to my doctor, 'Promise me you'll never send me to the lockup. You can't ever send me to the lockup. I couldn't take it.' He said, 'I cannot make you any such promise.'" "Surprise," said Sabbath. "They only stole the hubcaps." He opened the car door, and the moment he took the binder with the thick elastic bands back in place, out from under the front seat and handed it to her, she was sobbing again. Somebody else every 2 minutes. "This is hell," said Rosanna. "The turbulence doesn't stop." And turning away from him, she ran back up the hill, clutching the binder to her chest as though it alone would spare her from the lockup. Should he spare her the further agony of his presence? If he left now, he'd be home before 10. Too late to get to Drinka, but how about Kathy? Take her to the house, dial SABBATH, listen to the tape while they went down on each other. It was 20 to 7. Rosanna's meeting began in the mansion lounge at 7 and ran until 8. He strolled across the green bowl of the lawn, still impersonating, though for how much longer who could tell, a guest. By the time he had got to Roderick, Rosanna had called the nurse on duty from a mansion phone to ask her to tell him to wait in the room until she got back from AA. But that had been his plan, whether he was invited or not, ever since he'd seen on her desk the composition notebook in which she was readying her revelation for the next night. Maybe Rosanna had forgotten where she'd left it. Maybe from merely having to lay eyes on him again, and here without the helping hand of the drink whose beneficent properties as a marital booster are celebrated even in Holy Scripture, footnote, give strong drink unto him that is perishing, and wine unto the distressed in soul. Let him drink and forget his misery, and remember his sorrow no more. Proverbs 31, 6, 7. She'd been unable to think straight and had left a message with the nurse that made no sense at all. Or maybe she actually wanted him to sit alone in her room and read all that her agony had written there. But get him to see what? She had wanted him to provide her with this, while she provided him with that. And, of course, he had no intention of being party to any such arrangement, because, as it happened, he had wanted her to provide him with that, while he provided her with this. But why then remain married? To tell the truth, he didn't know. Sitting it out for 30 years is indeed inexplicable until you remember that people do it all the time. They were not the only couple on earth for whom mistrust and mutual aversion furnished the indestructible foundation for a long-standing union. Yet how it seemed to Rosie, when her endurance had reached its limit, was that they were the only ones with such wildly contradictory cravings. They had to be the only couple who found each other's behavior so tediously agonizing, the only couple who deprived each other of everything each of them most wanted, the only couple whose battles over differences would never be behind them, the only couple whose reason for coming together had evaporated beyond recall, the only couple who could not sever themselves one from the other despite 10,000 grievances apiece, the only couple who could not believe how much worse it got from year to year, the only couple between whom the dinner silence was freighted with such bitter hatred. He had imagined her journal as mostly a harangue about him, but there was nothing about him. The notes were all about the other him, the professor in the starched collar whose picture she was forcing herself to face in the morning when she awoke and at night when she went to sleep. There was something in her existence worse than Kathy Goolsby. Sabbath himself was beside the point. The last 30 years were beside the point. So much futile churning about, so much festering of the wound by which, as she portrayed it here, her soul had been permanently disfigured. He had his story. This was Rosanna's. The official in the beginning story, when and where the betrayal that is life was launched. Here was the frightful lockup from which there was no release. And Sabbath was not mentioned once. What a bother we are to one another, while actually non-existent to one another. Unreal specters compared to whoever originally sabotaged the sacred trust.